me, maybe 3, between Alvin Kamara, James Conner, and Devonta Freeman. Freeman's been underperforming to this point, but it's not been due to anything on his fault, really. I mean, the Falcons have just kind of been a wanky offense this season when they're not playing at home. I mean, Matt Ryan's not being protected, and Freeman's just not getting those goal line opportunities that we're used to seeing. But I think that if you can put together a package of receivers, because right now, if we didn't talk about this before the season, we should have, because this is why I load up on running backs at the draft. It is easier to find free agent receivers throughout the season. You're seeing guys like Terry McLaurin. You're seeing guys like DJ Chark, produce week after week, and you've been picking them up on the waiver wires for nothing. So, yeah, I think if you can package together some sort of receiver, 2-for-1 special, get yourself an Alvin Kamara or a Devonta Freeman, who better days are ahead. I mean, with James Conner, it's a different story because Ben's out the entire season. But at some point, Drew Brees is going to be back. And even without him, I mean, Bridgewater has been showing to be plenty capable. He's a former first-round pick, for goodness sake. And Kamara has been super efficient his entire career. He doesn't need a whole lot of touches to give you numbers. So I think that the Alvin Kamara owner is seeing these numbers and saying, this isn't what I signed up for when I drafted him, between 2 and 5. So I'll look to improve elsewhere on my team and trade up. You're likely not going to get a guy, even with Cam Newton being out, like a Christian McCaffrey and Ezekiel Elliott or Dalvin Cook. Those guys are probably borderline untouchable right now. But even an Austin Eckler owner who's panicking right now with Melvin Gordon coming back, he's saying, man, I got to get off this train before it just crashes off the cliff, and the bridge just, like that old scene with the clay train just collapses on the bridge. That's what Austin Eckler fantasy owner is thinking right now. So if you ask me, those are some good names to target. You can put together a receiver package that you don't really need, like a Terry McLaurin or a DJ Chark, put them together, with some lower level running back. I think you can get your hands on a guy like Kamara or.
Okay, so on the flip side of those trade scenarios, who would be receivers that you would not package to give up for those guys because you see them on an upward trajectory and you wouldn't want to see, like some advice for people like, okay, that seems like those would be a fair trade, but I think these receivers you'd want to hang on to even though you maybe got them off of like a Hollywood Brown per se. I don't think you'd want to package a Hollywood Brown because I think his arrow's pointing straight up. Or Sterling Shepard, let's say, because you and I just fought over him on the waiver wire, and if Daniel Jones continues, he's the number one. You know what I mean? Are those a couple of guys, or are there other guys around there that maybe if those guys don't fit that mold of, you would say, those guys hang on to, don't package them to go get that running back because their arrow is pointing up where their value is going to be too great in a trade scenario. Do you see anybody like that? Just so people don't end up kicking themselves in a trade scenario.
That's a really unique question. I'm glad you asked it because I think it gets asked the other way around, like which receiver would you package? So even though I'm not ready for this question, I'm glad you asked it because it makes me think outside the box. And a guy whose name I just mentioned actually is someone who I probably wouldn't trade away, and that's Terry McLaurin. We've seen him have really good games with Case Keenum. And I think that his connection with Dwayne Haskins in college only makes his value that much better when the inevitable move to Dwayne Haskins happens this season. So he's someone I probably would be weary about trading away. And obviously this all depends on roster construction, right? I mean, if you drafted receiver back-to-back in the first 2 rounds, you can afford to trade away pretty much anyone after that point. But McLaurin's a guy who I think could be valuable to your team long-term. Another guy who you mentioned actually is Sterling Shepard, because people may be wondering, well, when Golden Tate's in, is Shepard still going to be the one? And I think so, because Golden Tate's been a guy, and you know this as a Packers fan, who's always caught the ball around the line of scrimmage, right? Like he's just a bubble screen.
He's a rack guy. He's great at. I always thought he would go to the Patriots because he fits that mold. Like He'll run 3 yards, and it's an option route. He'll catch the ball, make a guy miss, and he's strong like a running back. He'll even bowl over a guy and run for 40 yards. But he does not catch contested 50-50 balls. He doesn't run, 15, 20-yard posts. But he's exactly that. So, no, Sterling Shepard, and by the way, Shepard's already got some rapport with the quarterback where dude hasn't even been allowed at the facility. So, Shepard's still going to have that trust with Daniel Jones, who's a young quarterback, in those moments. So I think that's a definite great point there, Dillon.
Yeah, so, and Jones has been, if this was Eli Manning at quarterback, then I would say maybe, yeah, Golden Tate's going to have more of an impact. But Jones has been showing the ability to push the ball downfield. I mean, Sterling Shepard had a 100-yard gain last week, as you well know. So, yeah, Shepard's someone who I would be also weary about trading. And the last guy I would mention is Chris Godwin, who's banged up right now. And, Mike Evans had the big week last week, so he kind of left Godwin in the shadows. But you saw the first 2 weeks that Godwin's been very efficient in this offense, and he's a young rising star in Bruce Arians' aerial attack. So I think that Godwin is someone who I also wouldn't be running to pivot away from.
What about Hollywood Brown?
Yeah, I would also hang on to Brown. He's been getting a ton of targets each game. It's just, I think Lamar Jackson's issues with inaccuracy at times kind of put a cap on his ceiling. But with him being the top dog for sure, and I mean, hey, who knows what happens with these injuries to the Browns receivers or the Browns cornerbacks, because you're going to have to play them again. And other cornerbacks in the league, I mean, Pittsburgh's been dealing with secondary issues, and the Bengals obviously dealing with secondary issues. So, I mean, there's another 5 or 6 games you're going to be able to enjoy Hollywood Brown just in the division alone. So I think he's someone I wouldn't be too quick to pivot away from either. And another guy I would mention is Tyrell Williams, because he's had 3 straight weeks now with a touchdown. And even though he's banged up and the offense doesn't look as sexy anymore without Antonio Brown, Williams has been producing very well, much better than what I think most people would have seen. I mean, when he got signed onto the team, I thought, okay, here's a guy who maybe you could flex every now and again with a big play. He gets a long touchdown like he did with L.A., but Williams has been a nice piece in that open offense. He's got 3 straight weeks with a touchdown, like I mentioned. And, number 1 receivers are especially hard to come by. I mean, it might be one thing to catch fire with a number 2 on a flyer, but 2 guys who are more interesting to me as someone you could probably trade are the receivers for the Panthers right now, because I have no clue. I don't think anyone has a clue what's going to happen when and if Cam Newton is finally
time out. Just so people are clear. Now, these are guys, receivers you would package to trade for a running back, right?
Yeah, and
okay.
I think you have to do it now, because we just had that big game with Kyle Allen last week where he threw 4 touchdowns, and it really gave a spark to this offense. And who knows what's going to happen today with Houston, but Houston also has a very susceptible defense. So I think they could enjoy another big day. And hopefully DJ Moore and Curtis Samuel are nobody that you're plugging into your lineup every week, and you can afford to trade them away. But I can see DJ Moore being locked into people's starting lineups. And I think you have to take advantage of this offense while it's kicking and moving, because I think once Cam comes back in, you're going to see a lot more Christian McCaffrey in the passing game again, and a lot more. Greg Olson's been doing pretty well, but I would capitalize on their value right now. And another guy I think you need to capitalize on his value is DeMarcus Robinson for the Chiefs. Tyreek Hill only has a few more weeks before he's expected to come back, and once he is back, you're talking Sammy Watkins, Tyreek Hill, and more than likely Nicole Hardman, who they want to move into the starting lineup with where they drafted him. So I think if you can move DeMarcus Robinson right now and get some good value back for him, maybe a Devonta Freeman, then that would be a good move long-term for your roster.
All right, man. See, now there you go, guys. That's why we love Dillon and his beautiful fantasy mind, because I can just come up with a question off the top of my head, and bam, this man's head and wheels start spinning, and you get this good, just off the top, all this information, man. Good job, Dillon. Bravo, my friend. Bravo. That was excellent work.
Well, thank you, sir. I appreciate that.
You can go back to doing what you were doing before I threw you down a rabbit hole there. But thank you for that,
Oh, no, you're
because
good.
everybody was really. I think that was some great information you just threw out there for all those struggling fantasy players who are looking at this point, like myself, at being the guy that's going to get punished in his league. Unfortunately.
Listen, we live in a world right now where it's hard for us as struggling podcasters. You know, people don't really trust our analysis just yet. They want to look for the big dogs with the blue check marks, and I get it. But if you just give me a chance, if you give the First and Goal podcast a chance, you will find we have the insight and we have the predictions that end up coming true more often than not. So just keep listening, folks. Don't don't be afraid to follow and give us those likes. Maybe buy some merch when we throw T-shirts out there when we finally get to that point. Definitely be checking out the website when that kicks up. So, yeah, I think the First and Goal podcast and Fantasy Files are on the rise, Jake.
Oh God, yeah. I mean, we're getting there. We're growing. It's a steady climb, and so far the rock ain't rolled back down over us on the push up the hill. So it's been good so far. We appreciate everybody's support out there. And I'll tell you this, Dillon. It's not just the good information. We have fun, man. Like, I think it needs to be said that when we have post-game shows and things get crazy and there's some cussing and some dumb stuff, like, we all realize, like, that's not real analysis. Like, I think people, like, it needs to be said, like, that's just the fan part of us getting it off our chest. Like, just like at the end of the show when I laugh about it and say, all right, now I'm going to say something smart. It's because I realize it's just been a lot. We know how to have fun, okay? So you can get great information, and you're going to laugh your ass off at how stupid we can get sometimes, too, on top of it all. But the information there, you'll be able to tell what's real and what's a bunch of BS. It's not that hard. You shouldn't.
Oh, exactly. I mean, if you just want stats, I mean, anyone can go to the website and just check out numbers on a monitor. But you come to First and Goal for the entertainment as well as the analysis.
It's the full package, man. It's the full package. It's a lot of fun
And
working
luckily,
with all the guys we work with too. We got a good group. We've got a good group and a good core of people out there that aren't even on the show regular, but they're guests, and you see them retweeting our stuff and all that. All those people out there, we really do have a good crew of people out in the Twitter world and supporting and retweeting and helping and guest spotting and all that stuff. It's a great group of people. We appreciate them all.
my Twitter family, they're some of the best people. And I am looking forward to reading the reviews for today's podcast because I know I'm going to see plenty of, man, I really enjoyed the show without Dave's voice. It was great, and I haven't to turn my volume down all the way to minimum. And please have more shows without Dave. I think we're going to be reading a lot of that.
Dillon, the funny thing about you and Dave is that you guys like grew up together, so there's this really mean-spirited picking on, like, way mean. You guys are just terribly mean to each other. It's entertaining for me, but boy, you guys get mean.
Oh, he knows I love him. And he loves me right back. He says it every time before we hang up the phone.
I know it's awkward being the third person on the phone during that transition.
Yeah. Speaking of transition, back to football, and we'll go to the Buccaneers game versus the Rams. Speaking of Chris Godwin, the young rising star that he is, like I said, he's still banged up, missed some practice time this week with a hip injury, but he's going to tough it out, and he'll be available for today's game. On the Rams side, everyone is healthy, but as always, keep your eyes on Todd Gurley's knees, you Malcolm Brown owners. Sounds good? Moving on to the New York Giants versus Washington Redskins. We have the second test of Danny Dimes, Mr. Daniel Jones out of Duke, facing the Washington Redskins and Case Keenum, who, man, seems like a great streamer this week. And I actually myself dropped Jacoby Brissett after I found out that T.Y. Hilton was likely to miss this game versus the Oakland Raiders. I pivoted to Case Keenum, thinking he could tear it up against that very weak New York Giants defense. But now I'm nervous because you got all these reports of John Gruden on the hot seat, and I know that's been the thing